Call the meeting to order. Bob, is there any changes to our agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
There's a motion to adopt the agenda. Motion second, all in favor? Any opposed? Approval of the September 25th, 2014 minutes. If there's any changes, additions, need to know at this time. Motion second to approve the minutes of September 25, 2014. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Those minutes are now official. Recognition of council members, and before I call on those, I'd like to make note that we lost one of the ex-council members this past week, J.B. Loring, who sat on this commission as representative of the council for 4 years. So just like to let everyone know that we're going to miss him. Council Lady Johnson will speak now.
Thank you, Chair McLean, Secretary Bernhardt, esteemed commissioners. I'm here on an item that I see has been placed on deferral, but I would like to at least speak to some issues so that staff would consider some information that I would like to have considered today. I'm here in support of the adjacent Metro Council District Representative Jacoby Dowell and the many constituents from my district who travel daily throughout the Hickory Hollow Crossings intersection, where the proposed cash spot building looks to build to get to Interstate 24 and to travel Bell Road to I-65 in Brentwood. The request is that you support, ultimately, when you get to the meeting that has been deferred, that meeting, is that you support the staff's recommendation to disapprove, as this request is not a minor revision to the PUD overlay, which also allows commercial uses as retail, but is an amendment which should require Metro Council approval due to the proposed building and its proposed new use being in keeping with the recent updated sub-area plan and the previous uses and surrounding uses for the parcel. With the building of the new Ford Ice Center and the upcoming opening of the Southeast area's new Regional Recreational Community Center and library, the structure would be the gateway to these major investments in the area where there are already 6+ payday lending establishments within the immediate block. This clustering of same-type establishments in one specific zone pushes out more traditional retail and businesses for which the sub-area plan and the overlay currently support. The narrow road, which the ingress and egress would have to accommodate with this new use, presents challenges to an already stressed infrastructure, which would create further backups and will impact pedestrians being able to walk safely on the newly laid sidewalks that Public Works has just put down and across the intersection negatively. With the abundance of empty space, this request saturates a 1-block radius. Government is responsible for making decisions that protect the health, welfare, and safety of its community. Our efforts to transform the area in the Hickory Hollow Crossings area into a vibrant place for retail establishments to return, which are much needed in this area so that we can meet a balance, has been expressed throughout our new sub-area plan. When you get to this request, please disapprove as staff has recommended, and I would like for my comments to be made part of the record today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. I'm here to talk to you today about 2014 S-170-001. While I understand this is going to be approved, I'd like to talk to you about the process that we've gone through in my district to talk about this particular process. Connectivity has always been the issue with regards to this particular project. The neighbors in Roxborough, Hampton Hall, as well as Lake Park do not want the connectivity. The developer is really, it's irrelevant with regards to the connectivity on that. But we've been told that at this stage and at this venture, the connectivity must occur. The only way that it could not occur is if we put in sprinkler systems through each one of the houses and the 49 homes that will be developed in this new development off of Earhart. No one's fighting the development. No one's fighting the opportunity for the landowner to develop the piece of property and to make money off of that. What we have been concerned about is the connectivity piece from Earhart over to what's going to essentially now be Old Hickory Boulevard. If ever you travel on Central Pike in the morning or afternoon, the congestion is unbelievable. And so what's going to occur is now we're going to have people cutting through in Wilson County primarily that will drive through these suburbs, drive through these neighborhoods, and create a greater traffic and greater safety issue than what already exists. And so therefore, I think at some point, this commission, this council, we need to address this issue and come up with something that's going to be viable, especially when you have all parties that are vehemently against the connectivity on this. There's not any way to negotiate. There's no way to talk about this. There's no solution that's allowed to be met in the middle. We're told what we're going to do in our suburbs. And so therefore, I'm obviously in support of the development being done. I'm not in support of the connectivity, and I wanted to speak to you. And I hope that as we go forward, we do find solutions on how we can work together and work as a collective body. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Bedney.
Thank you. Hi. I'm Councilman Bedney, District 31, and I also wanted to stand in support of Jacoby, Council Lady Dow. I won't repeat everything Council Lady Johnson said, but basically is what I think. So I hope you will heed to her when the time comes. I'm here today to support, let me look for it, 2014 SP 070-001. And I just want to be on the record saying that I support that. I send an email out, didn't get any comments. I believe people understand the need for it. And I also wanted to speak a little bit about change. In Nashville, we are dealing with change quite a bit lately, and that can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. And being good stewards of change by looking at historic preservation in a positive way, it's an important thing as we move forward. And so I will ask you to keep that in mind, that we make sure that the change is a change that is positive and that it really salvages and embraces what is great about the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Lady Dowell.
Thank you. Apologize for being a few minutes late, but I'm here again as I was 2 meetings ago when we discussed the plan amendment to the real estate at Mount View Road and Bell Road. I'm asking you to support the Planning Commission's recommendation, the Planning Department's recommendation to disapprove. I don't want to be redundant, but I'll just share some of the same comments that I shared before. Most of the zone policy in our district is very conflicting. It's old, and this piece of property is a very crucial and important piece of real estate in our community. 3 years ago, the community met for over 6 months and spent time updating our Antioch Priest-Lake community plan. We put a lot of thought and a lot of effort into that plan, and we talked about where we see our community going in the future. Over the course of the last year, we have made some significant investments out in that southeast corner. One of our primary issues is and has been dealing with a poor infrastructure out in the area, traffic, safety issues, because of planning and constructing things without careful planning, taking in consideration the existing infrastructure, making upgrades, and looking at how we site businesses there, making sure they're in agreement with the existing PUD. I'm here on behalf of, I can't begin to tell you how many constituents. This piece of property is encompassed by residential real estate. We have our senior housing that's right behind it. We have a rehab center on the other side. 2 apartment complexes. We have students that walk down Mount View Road every day, seniors crossing that area on their walkers and bike. I recently had to pretty much, work with Public Works to put the sidewalk in there now because of all the traffic. That area has water problems. I'm not sure how water approved it. When it rains, it floods right down there on Mount View Road. Still, it holds water. Based upon the plan from what I saw, we're talking about adding in additional surface area. We're talking about constructing something on the corner which block visibility and view. We're talking about a use that is not in compliance or agreement with the current uses in the adjoining PUD there, which is primarily restaurants and retail. And more than anything, we're talking about putting something in the community which no conversation, dialogue has been had. I had a meeting, invited the applicant to come and sit down and talk with the community, and let's see how we can address some of the concerns and make it work. And they were not present, didn't show up. I believe the best way of handling this particular request is through an amendment, because the base zoning is residential. It's retail in that PUD. It's restaurants. It was a restaurant there before, and we're talking about constructing and building something entirely new than what was there before. So I'm asking you, to disapprove. Allow us to address this through a public meeting process, let the community have input, let the adjoining businesses who have also shared their concern with me just 5 minutes ago calling, allow them to be heard, allow us to work together and come up with something that is in agreement with our Antioch Priest Lake plan, that does not adversely impact the businesses around there, that does not create a safety issue, does not add additional traffic, address the water concerns we have, and allow our community to have input into what we're adding to it. So I'm just here to bring about the same comments as I did before, along with Council Lady Johnson and several other council members out in our district are all in support of this. So I ask you to please disapprove at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council members that came in that I've missed? Okay, seeing none, we'll move along. Rob, I think we're ready for Stephanie to make her report on Nashville Next.
Sorry, I thought it was, sorry about that, Tiffany. Thought it was Stephanie doing it today.
Oh, okay.
That's my fault.
He told me wrong, Tiffany.
Yeah.
You're fired.
And
Put you on administrative leave. Along with me.
All right. Good afternoon. Tiffany Capehart from the Community Plans Division, and I will be presenting the latest, most recent research report we've completed as part of Nashville Next, which is a report about Jefferson Street and revitalization strategies. And so the outline, I'll go over the report and the need and purpose, the process and how we got to this point, a summary of the report, and then next steps. The Jefferson Street corridor has long been the heart of North Nashville. However, the negative aspects of urban renewal disrupted the economic vitality of the corridor. And since that time, economic development and revitalization of Jefferson Street has been an ongoing concern for stakeholders. So the purpose of the study is to identify strategies that would lead to revitalization. The study was to specifically look for non-land use or urban design strategies, since land use policy and urban design strategies have been the subject of past planning efforts for the Jefferson Street corridor. Also, the study looked to find strategies that would minimize displacement of existing residents and small businesses, which were the negative outcomes of urban renewal and that we do not want to repeat in the future along Jefferson Street. So the need for this study came out of the Nashville Next Community Engagement Committee. The Community Engagement Committee is charged with engaging their neighbors and groups in Nashville Next. They also bring to Nashville Next thoughts or concerns of their neighbors. In this case, Nashville Next CEC community member Sharon Hurt, also the CEO of JUMP, or the Jefferson Street United Merchants Partnership, noted that Jefferson Street revitalization was a lingering concern for stakeholders in the North Nashville area. So this began a conversation about what other tools could help spur revitalization along the corridor. So we began working with a group of researchers from the Community Research and Action Program at Vanderbilt University, and also a professor from the Geography Department at Tennessee State University in June of this past year. The team submitted a proposal in June of 2013. The research began in fall, and the report was finalized this month. The research team used case studies to examine best practices. There were 8 initial corridors under consideration, and 3 were selected for more in-depth study. The 3 highlighted were selected based on their similarity to Jefferson Street, their demographics, and their structural characteristics, meaning their proximity to our central business district, and also the similar anchors, meaning the historically black colleges and universities and churches and like that. They were also selected based on their strategies for redevelopment and minimizing displacement. So each case study was presented with 3 sections. They talked through the evolution of the corridor from its golden era to its decline, and then followed up by its more recent revitalization. The study also highlighted the organizations that were involved in the corridor's revitalization, and there was a summary of the corridor's redevelopment activities and their outcomes. So from the case studies, there were some broad recommendations were provided. The first recommendation was to partner with anchor institutions. In each case study, anchor institutions such as the HBCUs, or historically black universities, were involved in public and private partnerships. For example, Georgia State University in Atlanta made several acquisitions along Auburn Avenue for student housing, its administrative uses, and sports fields. The school also operates a small business entrepreneurial center along the corridor. So the second recommendation was to establish a lead organization. A lead organization provides continuity in the revitalization process where starts and stops are common. For example, in Greensboro, North Carolina, the East Market Street Development Corporation was established and oversees all development projects and programs for the East Market Street corridor. This CDC has a full staff, including a director of operations and a housing coordinator, and on its board, there are members from the city of Greensboro and the HBCUs in the area, including North Carolina A&T and Bennett College. The third recommendation was to coordinate development at different scales, meaning that economic development should match local and regional economic development goals. For example, the MLK corridor in Winston-Salem was included in the city's plan to rebrand itself as the city of arts and innovation, focusing on biomedical research and information technology. As a result, the local CDC received a $1.2 million grant from the Department of Commerce to start an enterprise center where those businesses represent the growing health and IT industries. And finally, enhancing transportation options, mainly transit options that provide more connectivity from the historic corridor to the central business district. In Atlanta, the Atlanta Streetcar Project is helping to connect the MLK King Center, 1 million visitors per year to their downtown area. Similarly, in North Carolina A&T, they work with their local transit authority to provide free transportation to its students. So a similar organizational chart was completed for Jefferson Street, and similar recommendations for the Jefferson Street corridor were made. So under partnering with anchor institutions, currently there's a greater opportunity for Jefferson Street's anchor institutions to be more involved with revitalization, mainly the local CDCs and the HBCUs. Secondly, the study notes that the lead organization was referred to by stakeholders that they interviewed as a watershed in garnering the broad support necessary to move redevelopment forward. So JUMP, the Jefferson Street United Merchants Partnership as a CDC, has existed as a lead organization on the corridor, but would benefit from an increase in broad-based support to move redevelopment forward. Revisiting what that broad-based support would look like in light of this study is warranted. This could include seeking new local and state partnerships and garnering additional support from Jefferson Street's anchor institutions. Under number 3 of coordinating development at different scales, for Jefferson Street, there has been coordination with state and local agencies. This is seen through the Gateway to Heritage Project, which was a partnership between TDOT, JUMP, and other anchor institutions. And so while those similar efforts are successful, they were very specific to the corridor and may not generate the larger impacts that are needed. Therefore, the study notes that partnerships that align with broader economic development goals will be beneficial to the corridor. Finally, the study recommends that transportation remain a part of the economic development strategy, mostly to keep the corridor connected to the central business district. This will be especially key for Jefferson Street as the Sulphur-Dale area continues to redevelop. There should be intentional effort to connect the western part of the Jefferson Street corridor near TSU and Fisk to the western part of the corridor in Sulphur-Dale. With regard to next steps, the report is now online at our NashvilleNext.net website, so anyone in the audience can download that report and read it. We also will share this report with Jefferson Street stakeholders, including JUMP, and the report will be shared with the Nashville Next Economic and Workforce Development Resource Team, which are local community members and topical experts who are guiding the creation of goals, policies, and action steps in the area of economic development for Nashville Next. And that is it, and if you have any questions.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Okay. Thank you.
Bob, we're ready to know if we have any things to be deferred.
Yes, there are several items to be deferred, starting with item number 1, 2014 CP-008-002. This is a request to amend the North Nashville Community Plan by changing the community character policy from an urban neighborhood maintenance policy to an urban neighborhood evolving policy for various properties at Albion Street and 42nd Avenue North. The staff recommendation is to defer to the November 13th Planning Commission meeting. The next item on the deferral list is item 2A, 2014 CP-010-002. This is a request to amend the Green Hills Midtown Community Plan to add special policy language to suburban neighborhood maintenance policy that applies to property located at 2001 Woodmont Boulevard to support the continuation of an existing non-residential use. Staff recommendation is to defer to the November 13th Planning Commission meeting. The associated case with that one is item 2B, 2014 SP-019-001. This is a request to rezone from R40 to SP zoning for property located at 2001 Woodmont Boulevard to permit physical therapy, medical office, and associated uses in the existing building. And the recommendation is to defer to the November 13th meeting. Next item on the deferral list is item 3, 2014 SP-041-001. This is a request to rezone from RM20 to SP zoning for property located at 1212 Hawkins Street, 1119 and 1121 Sigler Street to permit up to 20 multifamily units. The recommendation is to defer to the October 23rd Planning Commission meeting. The next item is item 4, 2014 SP-046-001. This is a request to rezone from R40 to SP zoning for various properties located at Church Street East, Valley View Road, and Cloverland Drive to permit up to 118 residential units. The recommendation is to defer to the October 23rd Planning Commission meeting. Next item is item 5, 2004 UD-002-006. This is a request for a revision to the preliminary UDO for phases 5 and 7 and final site plan approval for phase 6 for a portion of the Villages of Riverwood urban design overlay located at Hoggett Ford Road to permit 228 dwelling units, and the recommendation is to defer to the October 23rd Planning Commission meeting. Next item is item 6, 158-77P-004. This is a request to revise the preliminary plan and for final site plan approval for a portion of the Hickory Hollow Retail Commercial Planned Unit Development Overlay District for property located at 771 Bell Road to permit the development of a check cashing facility where a restaurant was previously approved. The recommendation is to defer to the November 13th Planning Commission meeting. Next item is item number 9, 2014 S-178-001. This is a request for final plat approval to create 4 lots within the Eastwood Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District on properties located at 313 and 315 Manchester Avenue. The recommendation is to defer to the November 13th Planning Commission meeting. The next item on the deferral list is 11A, 2014 CP-014-001. This is a request to amend the Donaldson Hermitage Community Plan by applying a special policy for a portion of property located at 3939 Old Hickory Boulevard. The request is to defer to the November 13th Planning Commission meeting. And the next one is the associated zone change. 11B is 2014 SP-073-001, a request to rezone from R15 to SP zoning for a portion of property located at 3939 Old Hickory Boulevard to permit up to 16 detached residential rental villas. This is a request is to defer to November 13th Planning Commission meeting. Those are all the items on the deferral list.
Yeah, but I'm going to read these off if you'll go through and be sure that I've got them correct. Commissioners, items that have been requested to be deferred is number 1, 2A, 2B, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 11A, and 11B.
That's correct.
Is there a motion to defer?
Second.
Motion is second to defer. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman, just for the record and for the audience, and I think the commission is aware of this, this is a large number of deferrals. It primarily, however, reflects the fact that as a part of your rules, any amendment to the community plan requires 6 votes of the commission, and several of the applicants for plan amendments requested that it be heard by the full commission or a larger group than that. So that's the reason. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. Any items to be on consent, Bob?
Yes, there are. As information for our audience, if you're not satisfied with a decision made by the Planning Commission today, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of cert with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of entry of the Planning Commission's decision. To ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met, please be advised that you should contact independent legal counsel. As noticed to the public, any items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. No individual public hearing will be held, nor will the commission debate these items unless a member of the audience or the commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda. So as I read the following items, please raise your hand if you'd like one of these removed from the consent agenda. First item is item 7, 2014 S-143-001. This is a request for final plat approval to subdivide 2 lots into 3 lots on property located at 1422 Electric Avenue. Staff recommendation is to approve with conditions. Next item is item 8, 2014 S-170-001. This is the Earhart Road subdivision. This is a request for concept plan approval to create a 49-lot subdivision and open space on properties located at 3110, 3112, and 3114 Earhart Road and at 5545 Chestnut Wood Trail. Staff recommendation is to approve. The next item is, item 12, the Bright Point Amendment. This is 2007 SP-151-001. This is a request to amend the Bright Point Specific Plan District for property located at 3781, 3791, 3799, and 3803 Pinhook Road, and at Pinhook Road unnumbered, to permit up to 81 single-family dwelling units where 42 multifamily dwelling units and 57 single-family lots were previously approved. Staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions. Next item is item 13. 2014 SP 20-070-001. This is a request to rezone from AR2A to SP zoning for property located at Burkett Road, unnumbered, to permit up to 14 single-family lots. The staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions. Next item is item 14, 2014 SP-071-001. This is a request to rezone from R6 to SP zoning for properties located at 245 White Bridge Pike and White Bridge Pike unnumbered to permit up to 19 residential dwelling units. The staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions. Next item on the consent agenda is item 16, 2014 Z-057PR-001. This is a request to rezone from AR2A to RS10 zoning for property located at 12444 Old Hickory Boulevard. Staff recommendation is to approve. Next item is item 17, 2014 Z-058PR-001. This is a request to rezone from RS5 to MUL-A zoning for a portion of property located within the Dickerson Pike Urban Design Overlay District at 1404 Dickerson Pike. Staff recommendation is to approve. Next item is item 18, 109-81P-002. This is a request to revise the preliminary plan and for final site plan approval for a portion of the Rivergate Square Planned Unit Development Overlay District for property located at 2001 Gallatin Pike to permit the development of a restaurant with a drive-through window. Staff recommendation is to approve with conditions. Next item is item 19, 2004 P-013-006. This is a request to revise the preliminary plan and for final site plan approval for a portion of the Mill Creek Town Center Commercial PUD Overlay District for a portion of property located at 6704 Nolensville Pike to permit the development of an automobile service facility. The staff recommendation is to approve with conditions. Next item is item 20, 2014 S-201-001. This is a request for final plat approval to create 3 lots on properties located at 1602 Lebanon Pike and 184 Spence Lane. Staff recommendation is to approve with conditions. And the last item on the consent agenda is under other business. Item 24 is to accept the director's report and approve the administrative items.
Let me read these back and you correct me if I made an error. Commissioners, items on consent today are item number 7, 8, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 24. Is that correct, Bob?
That's correct.
Is there a motion to approve these on consent? Seeing none, we'll hear all of them. Motion second. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay.
I just had a question more for us for our future workshops or something. There are a number of these that have some interesting topography, and in many cases the site, the way the site is laid out is solid with lots, even if some of them are below on the edge of a hill or various things. And I wonder if we can, not tonight, but keep encouraging more strategic allocation of where the houses go on the lot instead of acting like it's a white flat piece of paper with nothing under it until we get out in the field, which to me means that there's a lot of grading and cutting and tree leveling that's perhaps unnecessary. And I think there were 5 that I noted that I felt like we could have maybe worked harder at encouraging a little more grouping. And since we're talking about clustering and offering that opportunity, it's a chance to do that more maybe than we are already even. So I just, for the staff's direction or thought, if at some point if we need to talk about it more as a policy on our end, or if we sort of tell the staff that's what we're thinking, I just want to bring that up again.
And we don't have any problem having a workshop on that. In most of these cases, we have The staff has worked with the developer to significantly redesign the project from what it came in. It's not to say that it couldn't be done more. So we may want to actually kind of walk through a couple of these and see if we're, if the commission's comfortable with kind of where we went in terms of the steps in there.
And I'd be glad to talk to you after the meeting and look at those cases and see, and give you the kind of the background on what we looked at on each one.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. We're now ready to, there'll be actually three items, 10A and 10B, that'll be heard, public hearing, and item number 15. So, Cynthia, 10A.
Good afternoon. My name is Cindy Wood, and I'm with the Community Plans Division. I will be presenting item number 10A on the agenda, which is case number 2014 CP 010003, a request to amend the Green Hills Midtown Community Plan in the Midtown Study Area. After I complete my presentation, Jason Swaggart will come up and make his presentation on the accompanying zone change request, item 10B on the agenda, case number 2014 SP 074001, the M Residences. The community plan amendment request is to change the Green Hills Midtown Community Plan to adjust the policy boundaries between area T5, 10T5MU02, which is indicated on this slide by a lighter peach color, and area 10T5MU03, actually the area that's the darker color is the 02 and the lighter one is the 03, excuse me, and make other associated text and map changes to the Midtown study for various properties that are generally located between number 447 Alley, which is east of Division Street, number 442 Alley, which is east of 18th Avenue South, and Grand Avenue and East West Street, and the request is made by Kimley Horn and Associates, Inc. For various property owners. The staff recommendation is to approve a reduced amendment area and make several changes to associated special policy text and graphics in the Midtown study. And the outlines that you see on this slide here reflect that smaller area that we're recommending for amendment. The proposed amendment area is located, as I've said, generally between a set of alleys that are running north to south for the most part, and a couple east to west ones. You can see on here the area that's been originally proposed for amendment is what's outlined in yellow, and the alley that's the easternmost boundary basically runs between Music Row, Music Square West on the east, and 18th Avenue South to its west, and the proposed amendment area extends as far over to the west as alley number 447 that's between Division Street and the Adelicia that is right off where you see the word 447 Alley. And then the southernmost boundary of what's been proposed for amendment is Grand Avenue, which then turns into Music Square South further over. And what the staff is recommending is a smaller area that would be shifted over further to the west and north. And I'm going to tell you a bit more about that. This proposed amendment area includes the site of the proposed M Residences SP that you're going to hear about in a few minutes. And that site is shown by a red star on here, and it's located at the northeast corner of 19th Avenue South and Chet Atkins Place. The Midtown study is a document that was adopted as an amendment to the Green Hills Midtown Community Plan in 2012. The Green Hills Midtown Community Plan covers a much larger area and was last updated in 2005. The Midtown study was adopted following an extensive public participation process that involved a series of community meetings over several months. And the Midtown study applied the newer, more detailed community character policies to the Midtown area and also provided more detailed planning guidance for urban design, infrastructure, and zoning changes. The need for the Midtown study was driven by the increased pace and nature of growth and change in Midtown, coupled with public investments that included the Centennial Park Master Plan, the 28th 31st Avenue Connector, and preliminary studies for the proposed AMP bus rapid transit route, which was then being referred to as the East-West Connector. The study's adoption was soon followed by rezoning most of the area to implement the new policies, and much of Midtown was then rezoned later in 2012 to several more intense alternative zoning districts. The rest of the land use policies in the Green Hills Midtown Community Plan were subsequently translated to the newer community character manual equivalents in April 2014 as part of the Nashville Next countywide general planning process. And right now, the planning staff are in the process of updating all of the remaining community plans to reflect the input received through Nashville Next, which includes input that affects the Midtown and downtown areas, which is why I'm mentioning it. Among the emerging recommendations in Nashville Next is that a greater share of Nashville's growth should take place in and near downtown. And this is reflecting both increasing trends that we're aware of at the national and countywide level, as well as public input received through Nashville Next. This has implications for Midtown because it's expected to receive a more significant share of Nashville's growth in both employment and housing than originally anticipated, and this may result in taller buildings than previously expected, as well as a greater mixture of uses in locations such as the area we're talking about today. One of the key provisions in the Midtown study is the way that it treats different types of building heights. As a result, the study includes several different recommended building height ranges for various areas. There were some areas where the urban design overlay was already in place over in the 31st Avenue Long Boulevard urban area at the western edge of Midtown, and that had some very specific heights within it that were left in place in the study. But for the rest of the area, 3 height ranges were established where general ranges of building heights are recommended. And these are the low-rise areas that recommend generally buildings up to 8 stories tall, the mid-rise building areas that recommend buildings between generally 8 and 20 stories, and then the high-rise building height range where buildings up above 20 stories could be supported. And there were a number of factors that were taken into account when deciding where those different height areas should go. And here's a map of the entire Midtown study area. So you can see it's a very big area. It's outlined in blue here. And the amendment areas, let's see, it's way down in the southeast corner above the green area that is the Vanderbilt campus. And you can kind of see that yellow where the M Residence's proposal is located. Let's see if I can make this do what I want. Yes, okay. So here is our amendment area, and here's the M Residence's proposal, and it's within this much, much larger Midtown study area. And again, those low-rise height areas are the lightest peach color, and then this darker peach sort of apricot color, I guess, are the mid-rise areas, and then the tallest heights are generally along West End Avenue in this sort of brown color, and those all kind of correspond to areas where different levels of height would be most supported for reasons varying from their ability to support mass transit, high levels of mass transit, to the size of the street networks in various areas, and also their abilities to serve as transitions and buffers between smaller scale areas like single and two-family neighborhoods. Whoops, sorry about that. The zoning that was put in place after the Midtown study was adopted, rezoned very large portions of the area, and most of that zoning that went into place were to what we call the alternative zoning districts, and these were districts such as MUIA, Mixed Use Intensive A, Mixed Use General A, and ORIA, which is what the blue color that you see in our amendment area. And ORIA will typically yield building heights of 8 to 10 stories that correspond with that height limit. And this just sort of gives you an idea. You might have noticed that some of the properties in the area and nearby in Music Row are still zoned ORI without the A, and there's a difference in the way that the heights and building design standards work between those two zoning districts. Basically, ORI A buildings are given a little bit more height closer to the street, but there's an absolute limit on height once they step back a little way, whereas an ORI property has something called a sky exposure plane that results in a wedding cake effect where they can continue to go up the further back from the street they go. The Midtown study area contains several historically significant properties and adjoins other historic significant properties and districts. There aren't any conservation or historic zoning overlays in place in this area to protect those properties, but the proposed amendment area does contain several of the worthy of conservation properties that are shown in blue, and it also contains a couple of new National Register eligible properties that are here on Grand Avenue, and they're shown in the stripes, the upper room and the quad recording studios. And we did hear from the Metro Historical Commission staff expressing some concerns about including that north side of Grand Avenue in the amendment area because of that greater concentration of somewhat more significant properties and the fact that they're also located across Grand Avenue from a National Register historic district, which is not a zoning district but is a greater level of its significance. We also heard a lot of community input, and the commissioners received some of these in the form of emails that have been, and letters that they've received. And we also held the community meeting on September 22nd, and they expressed, folks have been expressing concerns about traffic and parking and loss of views and creation of shadows, also issues about infrastructure, and we also heard the same concerns about historic properties and Music Row and that sort of buffer that the lower heights were providing, and also discussion of whether it was premature to change the entire area at once. So all of the input that we've received and analysis that we've done have resulted in staff now recommending a somewhat smaller amendment area that would protect those historic properties that were pointed out and continue to provide a buffer in lower building heights to both Music Row and Edge Hill beyond. Edge Hill is shown in the brown color beyond the Music Row area. And in addition to that, we're proposing some changes in text be made to the Midtown study to deal with having taller buildings in areas where they were not initially being supported, paying special attention to providing transitions in scale and massing to these lower scale properties. And also, I mentioned there being smaller streets in these lower height building areas. One of the things that the Midtown study does is establish a hierarchy of streets and has different policies for different types of streets, ranging from the most significant to the smallest streets. And the streets in the study area, for the most part, are the smallest streets, which are local streets. And there's only one so-called secondary street, which is Grand Avenue, that was in the area proposed for amendment. So for those taller buildings, when dealing with local streets, we are asking that there may need to be improvements made beyond those required in the major and collector street plan, which doesn't really deal with local streets, and also dealing with pedestrian and bicycle issues and vehicular issues, and this could result in asking for wider sidewalks than would normally be required, and also more improvements for insufficient alleys. So again, the staff recommendation is to improve the revised amendment area, which is smaller, and associated special policy text and graphics. There are also some housekeeping changes that would need to be made to various maps and graphics that are referenced in the staff report. And this concludes the staff presentation.
Okay, as Cindy said, item 10B is the associated zone change with the policy amendment for the M residence. The request is rezone from office and residential intensive to specific plan mixed use, permit a large-scale mixed-use development. Staff is recommending approval with conditions and disapproval with all conditions, subject to the policy amendment as proposed being approved and disapproved if the associated policy amendment is not approved. The site is approximately 1.2 acres, consists of 5 buildings that have all been homes that have been converted to office space. The existing zoning, again, is office residential intensive. This is the proposed site plan. This is the building footprint. So it calls for a 19-story building with a mixed use, a maximum of 360 residential units, and a maximum of 15,000 square feet of non-residential units. That would include retail, restaurant, nightclubs, bars, those type of uses at office, all those uses. It calls for 7 stories. The first 7 stories are parking. They are lined along Chet Atkins and 19th Avenue with liner buildings to support commercial uses, and you see that as in the reddish color. Likely this request wouldn't require such a high, to be 19 stories. There's a 96-foot diameter combined sewer line that runs right through the middle of the property, bisects it. So if you see where the 2 red arrows are showing access, the line that's at the back of the alley, the red arrow, is almost a center line of that 96-inch line, so it's impossible, or I guess you could relocate it, but it's 96 diameter lines, pretty large to remove, so that kind of prohibits them from going down, so that's necessary for the extra height in this case. Access is from one point on 19th Avenue as well as at the alley. There's also loading is provided at the alley for the commercial and restaurant spaces. Parking is to be provided per Metro Code, so they're meeting the current standards as far as the number of spaces being provided. The next few slides are the elevations, conceptual elevations. So this is the west elevation along 19th Avenue. 19th Avenue, they're providing an 8-foot wide sidewalk, a 4-foot furnishing zone, and a 4-foot frontage zone. So this is a little, like what Cindy was saying, it's a little wider sidewalk than it normally required on a non-arterial street, which 19th is not an arterial street. There is on-street parking on 19th Avenue, so there is no planting strip, so you can get out of your car and walk straight onto the sidewalk. This is the east elevation, which would be at the alley, so you can see the access point into the parking garage, which is to the right, and then the loading zone is to the left. This is looking at the north and south elevations, the south elevation being along 19th Avenue. There's no on-street parking on 19th, so they're providing an 8-foot wide sidewalk and a 4-foot planting strip, which they call 4 street trees. This is some more images. This is at the corner of 19th and Chet Atkins. Another view looking at 19th Avenue. I won't get too much into the policy, but as you're made aware that the existing, as far as the land uses and what they're proposing, it is consistent with the existing policy. However, the height limitations on the existing policy limits it to 8, so what they're proposing is not consistent with that policy. If you approve the policy amendment, then the height would not be an issue, and it would be consistent with that specific requirement in the policy. Also, as outlined in your staff report, it does support several critical planning goals. In conclusion, staff is recommending approval with conditions and disapproval with conditions if the associated policy amendment is approved, and disapproved if it is not approved. Thank you.
This item is open for public hearing, and the applicant will be allowed 10 minutes for their presentation. You may hold 2 of that back for rebuttal if you wish.
Members of the commission, my name is Tom Boyle of the 36 Old Club Court. I represent the applicant in this matter. We would request the 2 minutes for rebuttal. As was mentioned by the staff, as the policy change and the zone change are both recommended, they're clearly tied in together. There's not an issue about use. It's a question of whether or not they can go higher than the 8 stories as currently set out. What was mentioned, I think, very importantly by the staff in their presentation about the policy is that although the plan which curtailed it at 8 stories was done 2.5 years ago, almost immediately following that, the Nashville Next plan took life and was commented by the staff in Nashville Next. One of their cardinal, most principal comments is that among the emerging Nashville Next recommendation is that a greater share of Nashville's growth should take place in and near downtown, obviously midtown, and the infrastructure investment should be made to accommodate that. That's exactly what we've got here. With respect to other issues that have come up with respect to the comments on the rezoning, I think perhaps the most telling thing is what was just commented by staff, and that is on all 5 critical planning goals: the support of infill, the promotion of compact building design, the walkable neighborhoods, the range of housing choices, and supporting a variety of transportation choices. Every one of those was clearly met by this application. The other thing that I'll mention is that what has been a concept of Nashville Next has been a reality in this area for the last 2 years. This commission has approved any number of projects that do the exact same thing that this project is trying to accomplish. The number of condominiums, apartments, hotels in the area of downtown and this midtown area have just been right on target with what this proposal is. I also want to comment at the front end, we've got great appreciation for Council Lady Erica Gilmore. I really don't know how she keeps all the different projects together that are going on in her district. There's a very significant number of them, and she's given an incredible amount of time to all of them, including this. With respect to this proposal, there have been a significant number of meetings and telephone conferences with neighborhood leaders. There were 2 meetings with representatives of Adelicia and residents there. There was a community meeting that Cindy talked about at Rose Parks. In addition, I'll comment, parking is an issue here. This client has more than 100 spaces beyond what's required by the code, a huge commitment to making sure this is a better place for the vehicular traffic. In addition, 19th, which is an issue right now, is to be improved under this proposal. I'd like to ask for just a moment the people that are here, all of whom may not address the commission, that are supportive, I wish you'd raise your hands. I'll comment also, as the staff did, this project had a number of different concepts moving forward. They came in from any number of neighborhood groups, from historic, and as the staff said repeatedly, my client was amenable to every suggested change. I can stand here and tell you every suggested change that was given to us by any metro agency we have agreed to, and it's incorporated in the plan. The final thing I'll say is that like many other projects, as they come along and you get ideas from different agencies, it makes a better project. What we ended up with, in my opinion, is a far better project than what we started with. We appreciate the time to work with these different agencies, but we've agreed to their conditions and ask you to approve this matter today. I do remind you it takes the 6 votes that are here. Beyond that, it's a legislative matter. Let it go to the Metro Council, but it should be approved here as a basic planning matter. Thank you for your courtesy.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Cassidy, 390 Mallory Station Road, Franklin, Tennessee. I'm here today on behalf of Lennar Multifamily Communities. I'm currently the division president and cover Tennessee, Georgia, and all of the state of Florida. Over the years, I've done several projects here in Nashville, in Green Hills, in Hillsborough Village, in the downtown area. This would be our second project in Nashville. Our first project is in Berry Hill. We'll close next week and build about 320 apartments. As we began to look for additional sites in Nashville, we really centered on the Midtown Gulch Vanderbilt area. And as we located this site, we felt that the Nashville Next plan really underpinned not only the decision that we were making from site selection, but also a financial decision that the city recognized that this area was a place where you needed additional density and additional mixed-use communities. Early on in the process, we met with the planning staff, and we met with the planning staff really to get their guidance and input on the project. We then met with Councilwoman Gilmore to obtain her guidance and really understand her thoughts for the development. And then after that, we met with multiple neighborhood groups. We met with Edge Hill neighbors. We met with the Adelicia. We met in their community room, presented our plan. We met with the greater community as well. And in all those meetings, we asked for their input, their guidance, and what they saw for what we needed to incorporate in our project. And what we heard really was parking, building form, and really architecturally how we treated the building. And we believe the plan that we've submitted, that we're asking for approval on, have taken those into consideration, primarily parking and congestion in the area. We're widening the street. We're committing to building 100 additional spaces above and beyond what the code requires. In addition to that, we've changed the building form and the architectural style of the building. We believe that this building will have a positive impact on the community, not only by the additional residents that it provides there to patronize all the existing businesses that are in that area as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Brendan Bowles with Kimley Horn & Associates, 1256 Buckingham Circle. First, I'd like to say thank you to Mr. Chairman and the rest of the Planning Commission and all the planning staff that helped us throughout this process. We've met on multiple times with them, talking about the architecture, the streetscape, and how this project could fit into the neighborhood. As part of this project, as you know, there's a policy change to the policy area. And as a result of the input we've received from the community in these community meetings, we have reduced the policy area based on the staff recommendation. And I believe that still allows to have these buffers that are important to the other Edge Hill area, Music Row, and of course the Vanderbilt campus. There's a lot of community benefits associated with this project. First and foremost is widening 19th Avenue, which we can all acknowledge as an issue. It's too narrow. It's 32 feet of pavement, curb to curb, and they got on-street parking and 2 lanes of traffic. So we're widening that and dedicating additional right-of-way on 19th and Chet Atkins. The infrastructure at the site is in place. There's a 96-inch sewer line that runs as a combination sewer that runs underneath this building. There's a 36-inch water line in the roads. And the 96-inch sewer is obviously something we have to design around. We've met with water services, but that has really prohibited this development to go underground and install more parking. One good thing about that is we won't be doing a lot of blasting to excavate and do any real excavation there. The traffic concerns we've heard from the community, as you've already heard from these other gentlemen, we're going to have additional up to 100 spaces above the code. We're doing some ADA improvements at the intersections surrounding the streets. Lastly, I would just like to hit on the critical planning goals that have already been established here by the planning staff and the 2020 plan. I mean, we're going to have more people moving into the city. I think we all want and encourage that. As we get more density, there's an opportunity for mass transit to be supported as well. Thank you.
Okay. The applicant does have 2 minutes left for rebuttal when the time comes. Anyone wishing to speak in support, if you would come to the microphone, and while the one at the microphone is speaking, the one that would like to speak after that, if they'd line up behind them, that'd save us some time.
My name's Dale Morris, and
give us your address, please.
Pardon?
Your address.
818 19th Avenue South.
Okay, thank you.
And this is the property we're talking about, and I own this property. And I've been on that block for 40 years. And I've watched it really come, full circle. And this is something that I never quite visioned, but I'm glad to see it's here, and I hope, that we find a favorable outcome on this. And even though I will sell this for it to go on, I will never leave it. I'll still be involved. And out of this project, I've already found a use that once this goes, that whatever comes out of this project, I'm putting it back into another project here in Nashville. And so I'm a home player and a team player. And I appreciate y'all, whatever you can come up with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Lance Bloom. I'm a commercial real estate broker at CBRE, and my address is 900 20th Avenue South, apartment 808. Even though I'm a commercial real estate broker, I don't have anything to do with this deal or any sort of business relationship on this deal on Chet Atkins right here, but I'm an Adelisha resident, so I live right next door. So I've seen a lot of development go on around me with Buckingham and then this project, and I've been generally for it, even though Buckingham's project, like my view of Vanderbilt, I live in reality and know that living in the urban core, you're gonna have different buildings come up, and some views might be blocked, and you might get some new views of a pretty building, and things change. But generally, I'm in support of any project that's gonna widen the streets around there, because I know I've almost played chicken with about 500 people in my 7 years of living there. And I'm also in support of more retail in Midtown, because I enjoy walking to different restaurants and nightlife and events around there. So I'm excited about Buckingham's retail and what they're going to do there. And I'm excited about Lennar's retail and what they're going to do there, because like everybody knows, the big benefit of living in the urban core in the city is the walkability of the urban core, the ability to go to different restaurants and retail and kind of enjoy city life. So I'm generally in support of anything that's going to help save my life by widening that street over there, and also all the retail amenities that these projects are going to provide. And I enjoy living in the city and seeing it grow. And thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, is anyone wishing to speak in opposition? If you come to the microphone, if there's anyone else wishing to speak in opposition, if you line up behind them.
Well, I have not had a chance to read all of the... Closer?
Yeah, name and address.
Oh, sorry. Elaine Blake, 900 20th Avenue South. That's the Adelisha. I know you've heard that some people in the Adelisha are for, and I will tell you that a great many also are not for this development. And I had not been able to hear all of the thought that has gone in response to the input we gave and other people have given, and that was reassuring. So whatever I had to say before is I've already said in my letter, and I guess at this point I just would have to say it feels like too much too fast, and I don't want this to be the Gulch again. I will have to move if it's the Gulch again, because I hear stories of things like there's just no green space there. You can't even find a place to let your dog go to the bathroom. I don't want that where I live. So a lot of good things clearly have been put into this plan. I hope it works. I am for growth, and I'm excited about what's happening in Nashville. But I don't know how you know when to stop, and I'm sure that all of these things are extremely attractive in the way they're presented to you. And those of us who aren't organized, and certainly we aren't in the Adelisha, because we are people who travel and work, and we don't really have a tight community. But hopefully you have the information you need, and I guess my thought is just please look carefully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Matt Schutz, and I live on 605 South 10th Street. I'm here today to express just a general concern with the amendment changes that allow for this building to happen. I know that Nashville Next called for greater density, walkability, and all of those things that we generally agree on in concept for a more vibrant city. Where sometimes there's a disconnect for me is with height. Sometimes I feel that density can be achieved without much greater height, and I feel as though sometimes when we change the plan to allow for much greater height, especially sometimes it feels in districts where the rest of the context is a bit lower, we start to endanger some of that existing context. And with greater height comes greater need for parking and the like. And sometimes those narrow streets are in fact a little bit more pedestrian friendly and walkable. And so again, I don't have a specific objection to this project, but I do have a general concern about allowing that greater height. I think density can be achieved without it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the Commission. I'm Walter Perry at 920th Avenue South. I have been very active in the public meetings. I'll compliment the Planning Commission staff and Councilmember Hunt for participating along with our own Councilwoman, Erica Gilmore. It has been very much an open process, and the developer has been very amenable to listening to our comments as concerns and as of the community. My concern, and as others have mentioned, is this too much for this area? It is the neighborhood I live in. I do see the traffic. I do see the congestion. My concern is that with the plan that was approved in 2012, the Midtown study, is it really necessary 2 years later that we need to change that? Why can we not let the zoning stay as is? My point that I want to make on the height of the building, I can certainly understand that. But you're talking about 1 acre that had 5 houses, that's now don't have 327 residences, all in that same 1 acre, that same footprint. I'd ask you to think about that on the impact of the infrastructure of Nashville. I think this needs to have a hard look before amendment is approved or considered. And the plan to put so many residences on 1 acre that currently has 5 houses, I would really ask you to think hard on that. Thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Drew Delamonica. I reside at 919th Avenue South. I just wanted to respond to the traffic and parking concerns that a lot of the residents in the area have. I don't really think that the plans with 100 extra spaces or widening 19th Avenue is really going to do much good for the situation. There's a parking garage already 2 blocks away, and nobody uses it. It's empty every weekend. Anyone that lives in the area will tell you people don't want to pay for parking. Of course, these 100 extra spaces are going to be paid for parking. Nobody's going to use them. People are going to continue to park illegally on the street like they do now. Immediately adjacent to this lot, they're currently building the Artisan, which has been going on for just about a year. Chet Atkins has been closed the entire time, so we can't have access to that road. So we go the opposite direction. They're building the Buckingham now. That road's been narrowed. If you want to turn down that where the new restaurant is, you're probably going to hit the other car if one's coming in the opposite direction. And lastly, just quality of life. We're building everywhere. I know that's a good thing. I'm not against development, but constant construction. Living across the street from the Artisan where that's being built has been a nightmare for the last year. They work from 6:30 in the morning to at least 7 o'clock in the night every day, including weekends. It's constant noise. You come home for work and you want to watch TV and relax, and you have to have the TV on full blast volume. I really think this will negatively impact the quality of life for the residents in the area. It's going to be 3 times the size of the Artisan, and it'll probably be at least a 2-year project. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, the applicant now has 2 minutes for rebuttal. I'd like to address some of the comments that were made here. First, as I think was evident by all four speakers, my client has absolutely met with everybody out there, have done everything they can to incorporate ideas that came across. No one had indicated we haven't met or haven't worked with them. The staff, again, has commented about a significant number of those items, but key items are parking and congestion. No matter what anybody says, when you set aside 100 parking spaces beyond what the code requires, it's a step in the right direction. With respect to congestion, all my client's doing is widening and improving 19th. As we came through the process, my client has architecturally changed the building as a result of different suggestions. There have been a number of things that came up over the last 6 months as this process has been discussed. To my knowledge, every concept that was given to us, whether a metro agency or at least a neighborhood group or individuals, we've attempted to incorporate and have incorporated at least to some degree, including the reduction of the policy area. It was the staff that talked about the policy area. They've agreed to reduce that. We've worked with them. That has not been an issue. Someone has mentioned the issue of green space and a dog, no place to take a dog. We've got a dog park in our building. We're one of the ones that have committed to do that. So instead of just talking about a constant issue, we did something to address it. In addition, the comment has been made about too much too fast, and I respectfully submit to you that if Nashville Next report means anything as they continue to talk about greater density, greater employment in this area, that's exactly what we've got here. I don't think there's any dispute about that. I also commented that with the Music Row area where it is, there is an excellent buffer between this area and the Edge Hill neighbors. And that's one reason why I think we've had such good success and lack of opposition by the Edge Hill neighbors. So I appreciate the time today, appreciate Erica Gilmore's time as the council lady, would respectfully ask approval, mindful of the fact that we need 6 votes. I would ask you to support this, let it go to the legislative body, let the council lady deal with the issues at that point. Thank you. Thank you. I declare the public hearing closed, and commissioners, we will discuss both 10A and 10B, but we'll take separate votes on them. Councilman Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I think this project has a great deal of appeal, and it accomplishes a significant number of the goals for the Midtown area. I certainly want to hear from all of my fellow commissioner members, but I feel that the staff has correctly analyzed this, and for discussion purposes, I would recommend approval for this particular project. Thank you.
I read all the many letters that were sent to us regarding this project, and I was struck by just the neighbors' feelings about the development. It's just a lot going on in the area, and it is hard to live in an area with so much going on, and the possibility of having your views blocked and the traffic congestion obviously is a big problem. Everyone knows that, and the parking. But I was glad to hear that the developer had worked with the neighbors' concerns and added additional parking. Whether people will take advantage of it because they'll have to pay, I don't know, but it'll be there. And then obviously widening the street will help the traffic congestion as well. It does seem to be, in my opinion, a large jump, the stories, but then, you know, the explanation of why you would need to go up instead of go down also made sense. So I would be leaning at this time towards approval.
I just wanted to verify with the staff that all National Historic Register eligible properties were removed from the policy change as part of the amended boundary that the staff has recommended?
Yes, there were 2, and they are now outside the boundary.
Could you pull that map up that showed those properties? So there's...
So here is the upper room, National Register eligible, and Quad Recording Studios, National Register eligible, The blue ones are worthy of conservation. And so when you go look at the boundary here again, would be, it doesn't like that. The upper room and quad still, so those would remain in that lower up to 8 stories area that's currently zoned ORI 8.
Thank you.
You know, these are always not easy. I think as the representative that's been appointed to the Historic Commission, I feel responsible for at least making the commission aware, and I appreciate the staff's working with the Historic Commission staff on adjusting the policy recommendation here in order to discourage, not necessarily protect, but perhaps discourage demolition of some of those more valuable structures. I spoke with Tim Walker today at the Historic Commission, and he reminded me that the National Register eligible properties is essentially the highest level of designation. The only difference between that and a National Register property is that it has not been, hasn't been taken through the paperwork to be placed on the register, but generally is treated the same as any property that's on the register. As most of you all know, I'm generally supportive of infill and concentrating density in areas like this where we have good infrastructure, we have transit, we have services, we have mix of uses. So given the adjustment in the policy amendment, I'm going to probably support this.
Jessica?
Well, like my fellow commissioners, I'm also in favor of increasing density in areas where it makes sense, where we have the infrastructure. Certainly appreciate, increased walkability, creating more of a urban feel in the Midtown area. I guess the one concern that's come up for me is we're talking a lot about how this project meets with the preferred vision of Nashville Next. And certainly I'm familiar with the idea that we're going to be focusing more development in town around the urban core. But there's a lot of other goals within Nashville Next that are along with those preferred future visions, including increased affordability and other things around equitable development. And because the plan has not been put out yet and it's not finalized yet, I feel like we're jumping ahead and taking what we like without thinking about all of the other goals that go along with that plan. And I also think just looking at the fact that this is a plan that was put in place just 2 years ago, I do give a lot of credit to, or credibility to, the letters and the opposition that we've heard from the neighborhood. I feel like they were there 2 years ago, or they've been part of this process, and so I struggle with doing something that goes against their wishes just 2 years later, and feel like it may be better to wait until the Nashville Next plan is adopted and then consider how the community plans need to be revised in light of that and in light of the other goals of Nashville Next. So I raise those concerns. I don't want to commit either way to whether I would support this yet.
Andre?
If we're talking about the policy question, the 10A, I had the same concern. The reaction to this was everybody met 2 years ago, and things have changed quickly in our economy, I understand. But I do wonder, sometimes we look at what point do we look at filling out the areas that we've said where we want the density before we start enlarging the area? And so that's a question, I guess, sort of for staff to talk about our own policy or to each other what we think about that, because if we said we want this area to be dense and here's a line, and so fill that up first before you go expanding it into another area. It's just a concept I think we need to keep considering each time that we're thinking about changing boundaries when we just put them out. That's one question I have. And then the point of, jumping it to this scale of development at the same, it's a big change. So we have to consider that. I think it weighs heavily to think that through. A couple of just technical questions I had. I think I saw something that on the garage frontage, it looked like retail was coming around on the sidewalks, and I thought that was a nice addition, something we're encouraging. We're not just looking at a garage wall. Is that correct? On the street front?
So you're correct. If you look at the red area, that is the liner buildings. So the other areas, it's not highlighted, but this area here is the residential lobby and offices. And then you would have your drive here. So for the most part, it maintains a lot of active frontage.
And the other two frontages are on alleys.
Correct. This alley and this is a side, so there's nothing here.
I'm just seeing lots of developer amendment to what we're wishing for, which I appreciate. The question I had too in the report is the capacity of the elementary schools. It says that there's room in the high school and the middle school, but I think it said that there's not the capacity in the cluster of elementary schools, and we're talking about 3 or 4 major multi-story projects in this area too that we've already approved, and I just wonder what our work with the school board is, or how we're dealing with that when we're putting in possibly a lot more. We're hoping to be putting in mixed types of residents, and some of those might be children. Where are they going to go to school?
Well, if you notice in the report, it refers to an urban infill factor. And typically what we see, and all this information comes from the school board. So, basically what we do is plug in the number of units, and then the information they gave us, it tells us what they've generated, and then we look at what schools are full. So in this type of development in these areas, we typically, with the urban infill factor, is basically taking into account that a lot of people living in these type units don't have children. If you had this many units in a suburban area, that number would be very large. So in this case, we don't typically see as many children and many students being generated. But as far as our recommendation, that's basically for informational purposes only. There is no requirement for the commission to require any type of upgrades to the school system or anything like that. It's just basically for your information when you're making a decision, and then it's up to the school board to require something or anything like that.
Just for the commission's information, those school numbers are actually updated every year. They'll be updated anytime now based on real numbers. And so each of these factors is a different factor based on the actual elementary schools, middle school, and high school. And then the urban infill factor is based on actual urban development. I think our hope is that over time you're going to begin seeing some children in those, but the actual factors are real factors based on what those types of units are actually generating right now and the location they are. So.
Yeah, I've talked to some people who have children who would like to move to that area, and they're not really able to, either to afford it or, it's complicated. I guess that brings me to my next point, and it's, again, a Nashville Next priority that we've already heard about a little bit. But I wonder, we keep saying we wish we had, the Nashville Next so we could talk about how we're going to start to require affordability or have it, at what point are we putting teeth into that goal? And I wonder if we consider it like we've done with TIF funding in the urban core, where we've said if you're going to get TIF funding, you have to have a certain percentage of changing, a tier of your project. It's not all full top market, but they're different levels. And so if we're granting permissions, it's like granting TIF funds. At what point can we say, we're giving you extra floors, so we want some of our people who want to work at Vanderbilt, or retail workers and all this retail we're going to have, or teachers or parents of some school children who want to live there, what percentage of some of that extra space can we say should have a ceiling on its income ability? And at that note, back to parking, the same thing. If you're getting extra parking, could a certain period of time, maybe weekend nights or some period of time, it'd be free, so that it is useful for the community. I'm just throwing that out there when do we get to start saying that? If we're granting permissions, at what point do we say, well, yes, but you have to do it this way?
I think those are good points. This kind of question, I think, came up at the last meeting. Clearly, those are a rezoning opportunity, especially an SP rezoning opportunity would be the time to put those conditions on. I would suggest, however, as I did last time, and the commission may want to do this as we're getting closer, that you establish a consistent policy that you're treating people in an equitable and fair fashion. And so that would, I mean, as opposed to obviously just picking a particular project out. And one thing the Nashville Next project will do will be make a series of recommendations on action steps. But that's not to say that the commission couldn't begin looking at those kinds of things prior to that.
I think we should. I mean, March is coming quickly, but on the other hand, with this many developments in the scale of time, it's a long way away. And I think we should be more active in choosing something this fall so that we can set a policy that people know that we're going to be requiring everybody equally to abide by, but it needs to be a policy that we should develop.
Just one thing, we're having a workshop with the commission before your next meeting to talk about the preferred future, and it may be something that the commission wants to talk about then.
I'm generally for this sort of thing. I'm concerned about some of the timing and that we're changing a footprint of an area that we just put in place. So I'm very torn because I think it's a great, interesting, exciting project that's been very responsive to us and to the area. But I still feel concerned about some of those topics. I'd love to hear back from what you all think about that.
Let me ask the applicant, I think that you've done another project here. What was the mix on that? Is there the project that was done before by the applicant or the owner, future owner, the mix of maybe smaller units, and does this project have some of the smaller units that would fit into the category that we're trying to accomplish here with this commission?
We do, Mr. Chairman. I can't give the specifics, and I do want to address some of the issues raised by the commissioners right on about Nashville Next. Is not here yet. The problem is we're kind of bobbing in the water in the meantime, trying to do whatever we can to adopt some of those items. Affordable housing is one thing that was mentioned. So this client took that aspect and clearly took into account, as has other presentations here about there's a number of units that are, if not a 30% affordability, they're taking into account the affordability factor. So we have taken that into account in the meetings we've had with the neighbors. We've expressed that, which is the same reason we went with 100 more parking spaces than required, because we felt like that's where Nashville Next was going. I want to be the first one to say, we know it's not here yet. And if it sticks on target, it's for May of this coming year, we'll all know exactly where it is then, but we don't want to put everything on hold until then. So the best an applicant can do is give his very best shot at going to all the neighborhood meetings, talk to the people at Nashville Next, incorporate those, and say, folks, please take the staff's recommendation on this, let it go to the legislative body. And that's why we realize there's only 6 people here today, and I've thought it was important enough for my client to try to move forward, but I want to make it very clear we're very plugged into what Nashville Next is requiring. This plan is symptomatic of that, but we can't tell you it's here yet. I mean, we just know, and we don't know what's going to change. We just know that some of the guiding principles, like greater density, walkability, making more affordable units, we hear that loud and clear, and we've incorporated that. And so that's why we're asking you to approve it today, because despite the fact that we've tried to mirror as much as we know about Nashville Next, I spoke to Rick about Nashville Next as recently as yesterday, it's evolving. I mean, no pun intended, it's evolving. And so we're trying to do the best we can with what we got in front of us, and that's the very best we can do. So we would ask the commission to approve that today, or you have to take the position that you really are not going to approve any policy change until really Nashville Next gets finished. I don't think that's a good thing for the city. I think it's a legislative matter beyond that, so I would urge you to approve it.
We're talking about policy first and then the specifics on the plan. And I think one of the concerns was that the restaurant will bring in more traffic. Besides, there'll be parking spaces assigned, I'm sure, for the people that live there in the office space. But is there some of the parking space at nighttime and on the weekend going to be dedicated for parking for the restaurant, that people don't have to pay for that?
Some of that is clearly set aside. That percentage of the 100+ is yet to be determined, but there will be a number of those 100+ spaces that are strictly available to the public that go beyond any requirement of the restaurant/retail. And the component you mentioned, Chairman McLean, about the retail was one of the items we heard loud and clear, that they wanted some retail in there. We've done that. I heard somebody else comment about the appearance from the street. There's been some objections by neighborhoods and by the members of this commission about the first floor looking like a parking garage. We've avoided that. I mean, we've tried to incorporate everything we can that's now known or expected to come out in Nashville Next, but we're not clairvoyant. We don't know how that's eventually going to come about. But we do know, without any question, the staff's recommending it because they know that we've been responsive to all of those issues.
I think I would remind the commissioners that, the retail space, the restaurant stuff is something that's part of the, what we're asking for on the mixed use and where the people do have walkability, so.
I do have actually one more question for the staff about the policy. Could you all, maybe for us and for the public, distinguish between the T5, 01, 02, and 03, and that map that shows where those things are and sort of what the differences, those definitions are, or requirements, or permissions? No, the one that has the
just the
policy.
zoom in?
It had the policy and it marked the T5-01-0, that one, that one.
That's the zoning.
Right, so the zoning, the gray is 02. What we have.
This is the zoning. Let me go back to one that shows the policies. Okay.
Yeah, that one, okay.
Okay,
so we have 01 is the denser area, 02 and
right,
03.
that's the upwards of 20 stories. So that's the highest intensity along, or the greatest height along West End Avenue.
So that's what the 01, 02, and 03, those are
right.
numbers.
The medium intensity going a little further away.
And then the 8.
And then right now, this whole outlined area is in this 03, the up to 8 stories, the lowest intensity. But the recommended amendment is to add part of it onto that mid-rise.
So that's my question, is that those numbers refer to the height. Okay, that's what I want to be sure.
Walter, you made a motion to approve early on, and that would be the motion for the policy amendment, not for the specific project, but for the policy amendment. Was there a second to that from anyone? Second. Okay, we've got a motion, second. Other discussion before we, Hunter?
I just wanted to point out that, I think Commissioners Farr and LaQuire raised some interesting points and very good points. And the question of, we've rezoned a lot of this area for much higher density than it was before, and we've got a lot of room to fill that up. So it's a tough, it's not an easy answer here. I mean, I do think this area has already seen quite a bit of transition, and is sort of well on its way. And while there's probably a few more sites that will be redeveloped, there's quite a bit of this area that's already been redeveloped, and so it's a pretty limited expansion of the policy area. And again, to reinforce, the amendment or the proposed amendment by the staff, helping protect some of the lower scale and making the transition down toward the Music Row area, and protecting, some of the historic structures. I think it's, I think it makes sense.
I'd like to add also, I think I heard, that the infill, we draw the line, let's fill that up first before we jump the line, but some of the lots that along Division there, that along that V shape, is not going to be developed into something of this magnitude, and a lot of that may not be, may be a need for this type of building, but the owners in that particular area that's already zoned may not want to do that for a long time, so we may stymie growth because of that. But I'll just throw that out. But other comments, I think, Andre?
Yeah, I'm listening. It's
Okay.
not easy.
We're about ready to vote. Jessica?
So just to clarify, the Alicia is only 8 stories, is that right? No, it's the taller.
It's 15 stories.
Okay.
That's interesting that you raised that because there are 2 buildings within the area that we're recommending for amendment that are already taller than the height limit by quite a bit. The Adelicia and University Square condominiums, which is 16 stories. They predated the Midtown study.
Okay, thank you.
Cindy, sorry, could you point out on this map those 2 projects?
That's the Adelicia. It's kind of covered by the 10 T5, and then University Square is an older building that's here directly south of this site.
And what are the heights of those?
Okay, the Adelicia is 15 stories. University Square is 16. It has some different heights, but it's got that wedding cake back.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
I'm told it's 14 stories, and I think you would know because you live there, including parking. And the Adelicia is 17.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the policy amendment as staff recommended. I'd like to see a show of hands, all in favor. Okay, 6, and that's unanimous, and that's what it would take to make the policy amendment. So that is passed. We will now move on to the plan itself. So, Walter, any discussion?
Yeah, this.
I'm sorry. We just voted on.
See, there's not another discussion.
We discussed both of them. We were going to vote separately.
I'm just if there's any more discussion. Unless you're ready to make a motion? Walter, you want to make a motion?
To what?
To approve 10B.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve 10B, but let me just say, can I say, I got a comment. I generally don't make a lot of comments, but I think they kind of piqued my antennas when they were talking about the buildings and the congestion and when do we stop. And I was just so happened downtown the other day, and I was counting the cranes in the air. And based on the cranes I see, and the cranes that yet to come, we got a lot of buildings to do. And I'm comparing that with the conversations that we had just a few minutes ago. When do we stop? It's too much congestion. Well, yeah, you're going to get that kind of congestion based on the number of cranes I see in the air. So we got to either say we don't build no more or keep building. I mean, where is the balance to the conversation we just got through having with the number of cranes sticking up in the air that we're building? So I just want to make that comment, and I do make a motion to approve 10B.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second to approve 10B. All in favor? Raise your hand. Unanimous again. 10B passes. We're now ready for item number 15.
No, keep going. There it is. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, Lisa's ready.
Okay, this is item number 15. It's a request for preliminary SP for 19th and Broadway mixed-use development. The request is to rezone from MUIA to SP mixed use to permit a mixed-use development. The site is 1.33 acres in size. It's located on the northeast corner of 19th Avenue South and Broadway. The current use of the property is office and retail, as well as some surface parking. There is one structure on the site that is National Register eligible. Staff recommends approval with conditions and disapproval without all conditions. The existing zoning of the site is MUA. The surrounding zoning is MUA and a commercial PUD. MUA allows 7 stories in 105 feet within the Build 2 zone in regards to height. There's a step back requirement, and then the maximum is 15 stories in 150 feet. There is currently no overlays on the property, no historic overlays on the property. This is the proposed specific plan. The proposal is for a 24-story multifamily component and a 16-story hotel component with structured parking. The plan proposes up to 270 dwelling units and up to 220 hotel guest rooms. Access for the property will be from Broadway and from 19th Avenue South. This is a proposed rendering of the project. Have some photos of the site looking from different directions. This is from the intersection of 19th Avenue South and Broadway. This is looking northeast on Broadway. And this is then looking southeast on Broadway. This is the alley that would be the back of the project and where the entrance off of 19th Avenue would be. The current policy is T5 Center Mixed Use Neighborhood. The proposed project is consistent with the policy in that it provides additional residential and a hotel, which would support the already diverse mixed-use area. The location of the project in relation to other approved and planned projects, as well as the width of Broadway and the creation of a pedestrian-friendly streetscape, supports the proposed height of the building. The proposal also meets 4 critical planning goals in that it supports infill development, creates walkable neighborhoods, provides a range of housing choices, and supports a variety of transportation choices. This is again the existing conditions of the site, and staff recommends approval with conditions and disapproval without all conditions.
This item is open for public hearing. The applicant will be allowed 10 minutes, and you may keep 2 back for rebuttal.
I'm Larry Papel. I'm a Nashville attorney, and I reside at 4320 Signal Hill Drive in Nashville. I'm here today on behalf of the applicants, which include Regent Partners and St. Clair Holdings, and their representatives are back here. Would you raise your hands, please? We appreciate the attention of the staff and Council Lady Gilmore. This has been a quite consistent and quick process. And we've come before you having agreed to the conditions that the staff and the various departments have placed on this after much discussion. There's a much better looking project because of that. This is a rezoning to specific plan. This is Broadway is an arterial street. It's a very wide, highly trafficked street, and we believe that this project is very suitable to the current plan, and of course that's why the staff has recommended it. It does meet the critical planning goals, and Civil Site Design will comment more on that. I really wanted to touch on some of the opposition that we might hear today. Beginning yesterday, the staff has been, I think, received about 50 emails from various people. None of them are really against the plan. They seem to be against only the demolition of the older building that is on the site. And it is an old building. It is eligible for the National Register. It has been an office since the mid-'70s. Of course, this is a zoning request, not a demolition request. In talking to Mr. Sloan earlier today and to others, I just want to remind this commission that we're not really here to talk about demolition. This property could be demolished tomorrow. Could have been demolished today. Changing the zoning will not change the demolition rights of the owner. Demolition is really a product of value of the property, highest and best use, what's developing in the neighborhood, the appropriate zoning, the plan, many factors other than whether a building is old or whether it's National Register eligible or any other qualifications of the building. We certainly should be sensitive to that, but we do not want, and I do not think it's appropriate for this commission to use demolition as a zoning or non-rezoning tool. That is, as I understand it, and as Mr. Sloan understands it, not really what we're here for. This is just a rezoning issue. We believe that the SP zoning that's been applied for and recommended by the staff does meet these critical needs. It is appropriate for this property. This property is going to be developed one way or another. The value is just way too high for it to stand as it is. Something's going to happen. By applying an SP, this commission, the Metro Council, and the staff can control with reasonable certainty per the guidelines how it should be developed, and that's really what we're here for today. An SP will allow that. We believe it contributes to the urban core. We're looking for pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods, mass transit, strong jobs, housing balances. That's what this does. We are going to reserve 2 minutes, but I do want to turn the podium over to Hal Clark with Civil Site Design.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, member of the commission. My name is Hal Clark. I'm planner with Civil Site Design Group. And I just wanted to add real quick that as we've heard all evening, we collectively as a planning and urban design community have really worked hard over the recent years trying to find ways to encourage and attract infill redevelopment and density, residential density, in appropriate areas of our urban neighborhoods. And as you all know, this development pattern that we're proposing is the thing that allows us to create these urban living neighborhoods, these commercial areas in urban neighborhoods. It allows us to support public transit opportunities and also to more adequately and efficiently support our urban infrastructure that exists. And this corridor, this Broadway corridor, this Midtown neighborhood actually fits and presents exactly the opportunities that we describe when we're in these meetings, in these public meetings, in these planning and urban design and redevelopment meetings. And this is what we describe. And I thank you again, and I ask that you support this and consistent with staff's recommendation to approve with conditions. Thank you.
Support. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition?
Yes, sir. My name is Robbie Jones. I'm with 839 Seymour Avenue. I'm representing Historic Nashville. I'm the past president and current secretary. I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to speak. Mr. Papel is exactly right. We're not opposed to the project in concept. we're opposed to the project because it would require the demolition of a National Register eligible property, the Albert Samuel Warren House.
Let me stop, and we'll give you time there, but staff, does this change the demolition? Is that an issue? I mean, the building can be torn down whether we pass this or don't pass it, correct?
The current zoning would not prevent demolition of this property.
Okay.
Correct. The Metro Historical Commission recommended disapproval for this very fact because it is a historic property. It's a 126-year-old house. It's got architectural value, the rare example of a Romanesque revival home, very few left in the West End Midtown corridor. It also has historic significance as it was the offices of the Crabtree and Taylor architecture firm from the 50s to the 70s. It was the headquarters for Atlantic Records due to its location, Music Row, in the 90s. So it's got lots of value. Our members and friends of Historic Nashville have just been overwhelmed with contacting us with overwhelming opposition to this project for that very fact. We're hoping that you will disapprove and allow the applicant to go back to the drawing board and adjust the plan so that the home can be incorporated into this design and bring it back to the table and discuss with the Historical Commission a way to balance preservation with development. And that's the key word here is balance. Nashville is growing in by leaps and bounds, and as you know, this lots of development, and we're trying to balance this with preservation. We're trying to catch up with the developers, and we're going around trying to just catch up. RCA Studio A was a big, huge battle, as you saw last week, and then this week we're on it again. This property is one of our Nashville 9 properties. It's very important to the community, and we appreciate your consideration and ask you to agree with the Historical Commission and disapprove. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon again. My name is Matt Schutz, and thank you again for having me. My first concern with this is a due process concern right now on the website. We have 2 staff recommendations. One is for deferral and one is for approval. And so if I were a neighbor, I would not know whether to show up or not because the staff recommendation doesn't say one thing or the other. My second concern is that this project indeed creates a walkable neighborhood. I feel as though it creates a large curb cut on Broadway, only 50 feet from the intersection with 19th Avenue South, and then on 19th Avenue South, it creates another curb cut rather than improving and utilizing the existing alley that's there. Third, I have a concern that we're changing the zoning here. We're offering them something. We're changing it from an FAR of 5 to 9.5. We're roughly doubling the allowable height here. And certainly a smaller building that kept the historic resource would still support the critical planning goals of the staff recommendation. And if it more closely matched the allowable FAR. I guess what I'm saying is, if we're going to offer the developers additional height and allowances through the SP process, the least we can do is ask that they respect the existing architectural and cultural context that makes that property an attractive investment in the first place. They could certainly tear it down, but they could certainly do that with the existing zoning as well. Finally, please do not feel bound to act a certain way by the staff recommendation or previous decisions. This is a new and separate case, and I believe you have been appointed to make judgment calls based on logic and flexible guidelines. I feel like if this SP is approved as presented, it will conflict with sustainable planning principles and the intent of the community plan.
Yeah, thank you.
I urge you to disapprove this project in its current form.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you again for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Brian Tibbs for Elmington. Just speaking, I understand that this building will not, doesn't affect the demolition, but of course, as the development is shown right now, it will show for demolition. This, one of the few latest gems on this street, historical gems, and it would just be a big loss to the community with this area and losing all it. My office is right up the street, and we walk right past it, and it's one of the few mansions as well that's actually still in really good shape too. So I just urge the commission. I know that this is a zone change and not for demolition, but just to start understanding that this discussion has to be happening, that we can't continue to just lose all of our historical integrity of this area and just kind of the reciprocal effects of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, the applicant's got 2 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a balance. Historic properties are always a balance. I own a 165-year-old home in Grundy County that is also a gem. It's also surrounded by other 165-year-old homes in a historic neighborhood, and I am very sensitive to preserving that which is culture in certain cities in the right place. This one just isn't in the right place, and it's not what we're here to talk about today. I think the staff, in its recommendation and analysis, got it right. And they said, in responding to the Historic Zoning Commission's, Metro Historical Commission's recommendation for disapproval, that while the concerns of the Historical Commission are well-founded, they must be balanced with the need for development of the Midtown area to be intense enough to support high levels of mass transit and a strong jobs-housing balance. The inclusion of the property in the specific plan allows for design considerations to be addressed, leading to a more thoughtful development. So yes, this property will be developed. It's just a matter of how and when. This SP zoning gives Metro, the staff, the council, this commission, the maximum input into thoughtful design consistent with the plan and consistent with the critical goals that are in place today, and I suggest are also in play, will be in place after Nashville Next is adopted next year. So with that, we just ask you to balance the demolition concern and keep this in zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I declare the public hearing closed. Hunter, rather come back to you?
No, it's okay. Again, these are really, really tough issues that, that we have to grapple with. And makes it harder when there's folks on both sides of the argument that have committed much of their careers to making a better Nashville and believe strongly in creating, a great city. And, again, sitting on the Historic Commission, I, feel obligated to do whatever I can to encourage and help protect our historic resources. I think it's a conversation that our community's got to be having about what's important to us and how can we protect these resources that are somewhat limited now. I think there's ultimately tools that we may have to make hard decisions on in order to protect some of these structures. We've lost so much in the Midtown area that it's hard to imagine, 20 years from now where we may not have any more of these structures without some sort of protection. I think the design, the plan, is really exactly what, we all have envisioned for Midtown. I'm interested in hearing my other colleagues' input on this, and I guess as much as I want to vote to disapprove this, I'm asking myself, this really isn't about what I want, frankly, unfortunately. It's about it's about reality. It's about the legal rights currently of being able to demolish. Turning this down, will not protect that building. I think it's a shame. I think it's unfortunate that we have a lot of out-of-town developers. I don't know if this is an out-of-town developer or not, but often out-of-town developers who don't necessarily, aren't, this isn't their home, or they're not asking, is this important to me or to us as a community to save these types of structures, the few that are left. And so I think we're seeing a lot of that. So I think for a lot of us, I think this commission would be very supportive of finding the tools and putting in place tools on properties to help protect them. But in this case, we haven't. So I'm going to listen to my other colleagues, but that's my challenge I'm wrestling with.
Thank you. Lily?
Well, I'm glad Hunter went first because I wanted to hear what you thought about it. I think if the question was whether we would approve protection of the building, I think that would be an easier question to answer. But as we've heard, it's not a question about whether we can protect the building because we can't. So the question now is, if the building goes away, which it can do today, tomorrow, what type of development would we like to see on the property? And I agree with everything Hunter said and the analysis of the staff that this would be a development that would be ideal for this location. And so although it's unfortunate that we don't have the ability in front of us to protect the building, that's just what it is. And I do like the development. I hate that the building will have to be destroyed, but it doesn't seem like to be within our purview. So, thanks.
Walter?
I have the same mixed feeling that Hunter had when we have these kind of projects. I have lived in this city all my life, and I saw an entire community destroyed. Well, it wasn't destroyed. It was torn down, relocated, and moved under what they call urban development then. They call it something else today. I won't repeat that. But I'm torn between what I remember as a teenager right out there in South Nashville and the ability of the people to make decisions on their property. I've always thought about property rights to an individual. And so I'm torn between that because I understand how I felt when those houses was torn down over on Fifth Avenue. The community didn't want it, but we didn't have a historic commission at that particular time to do what we do now. But the same situation occurs. You have what the community want to see stay, and you got people with property rights. And having experienced all that, I'm still in the process, or in a position rather, to listen to people who own it because I believe in property rights. That has a bigger bearing on what they want to do with their property as opposed to what we think we want to do with somebody else's property. So for that reason, sound like the tanks. But anyway, for that reason, I think I'm going to lean toward supporting the staff.
Okay, thank you. Jessica?
I was also glad Hunter went first because I was curious to hear his insight into this. I guess I'm still struggling with process overall. So there's nothing to protect this home that's in place at this point. If someone applied for a demolition permit tomorrow, it could be demolished.
It's a complicated question. But
yes and no. It depends. It's complicated, whatever all the pat lawyer answers are. To the point, obviously there's no demolition without a demolition permit. There's no demolition permit without an application for a demolition permit. So the notion of it could be torn down later today, perhaps overstating it, although the hyperbole probably makes the underlying point. By zoning, theoretically, they could in fact apply and likely receive a demolition permit. All that is speculative, but it's obviously part of the plan as presented to the Planning Commission this evening. The Metropolitan Code of Laws, both in the property standards section, which is chapter 16, and in the zoning section 17, has some criteria whereby other entities besides the Metro Codes Department, which is the entity that would issue a demo permit, can check off and review. One of those entities is the Historic Zoning Commission, or the historic staff. That could more evenly pace the process whereby a demolition permit is issued for everybody to give one final look. In many instances, that results in conversations with developers, landowners, and staff at Historic or other interested entities. However, as has been, I don't want to just bang the same drum, but as has been stated already, what's before the Planning Commission tonight is not the question of whether or not to demolish the very old house on the subject property. So if you have other questions on process, I want to make sure I stay on task and answer those.
No.
But I may have drifted.
So, but our approval of the zoning change would not have any influence on their ability to get a demolition permit?
Correct. If the commission were to approve the application before you, it is not it greases the skids for the issuance of a demolition permit, nor does it complicate the issuance of a permit necessarily. That happens as a separate process.
Okay. Okay. I do agree that we're losing a lot of the historic stock in Nashville, and not being a Nashville native, when I look back at pictures of downtown and the Midtown area, I'm shocked to see what we've lost. Nashville could have had some of the most beautiful architecture that we've seen in a lot of our neighboring cities, and it's sad that it's gone. And I hate to be a willing party to accepting that we're going to demolish another building. The other side, and this is again, I think just a general question for us as the commission. Tonight, if we go forward with this, we're basically saying we think another 600 units of multifamily housing is going to go into a 2-block area on top of a 22-story building on top. I'm just, at some point, I feel like we need a market study to determine the saturation point, because I just cannot believe that. Again, I would just be curious to see that we can truly support the number of units that we're rapidly approving. So I think that's something as a commission that we should think about, is just having a sense of how these projects all work off of each other. And maybe the same on the hotel front. But in terms of how this fits from a development perspective, how it aligns with the site, I support it for that reason. Agree that it meets the critical planning goals. I just wish there was a way to say we need to go back and make sure that that building was preserved.
Andre?
I wanted to ask the staff about the question that was raised about the curb cuts. Could we look at the site plan and just discuss that for a second?
There will be an entrance on Broadway here, and then the secondary entrance here, and the entrance off of 19th will primarily serve the multifamily, and then this entrance on Broadway will be where the hotel drop-off will be here, the motor court for the hotel there.
And so in your discussions with them, there wasn't a way to put the entry up from the alley instead of a new curb cut? Is that a new curb cut onto 19th?
It is here, yes. We actually worked quite a bit with the developer in regards to the hotel drop-off area. They had originally...
No, I'm not talking about Broadway. I'm talking about the small one at the top of the drawing on 19th.
Here.
It's right next to an alley, is that correct?
Right, the alley.
So we're putting in a new curb cut next to an existing alley instead of putting the entrance to the garage from the alley? Is that what I'm seeing? I just want to be sure I understand.
Yes, correct.
And did you all discuss that was there any negotiation about where that curb cut went, or that we don't like new curb cuts if we can avoid them?
I don't believe that there was, no.
Okay, well, I think that was a good point raised. I don't know the turn radius and all that in if that's the entrance to the garage, if it could come off the alley. I think we would all prefer that if it's possible, which maybe they've already studied and it's not, but if you hadn't discussed it with them, maybe you could.
Okay.
Once it get here we go, giving lots of entitlements and not asking for some of our other goals for Nashville Next again. So yes, I think that conversation is urgent. I'm glad we're going to bring that up at the workshop in October because it's really critical. This one I'm excited about because of the design. I think at least the rendering is swaying me. It makes it look like it's a nice design that we're going to be excited about. As far as the house, I don't know the logistics of if there's a contingency on a purchase of a lot that they don't own and they can't get it and then tear down the house if we don't give zoning. So, maybe there are ways that we'd slow it down. I don't know the issues. But I keep trying to picture that house next to, if for instance, they didn't have that lot and they built everything else at this height, and then the other parcel can also be built up, do we leave that house as sort of a Disneyland stuck in the midst of towers? I just wonder what the context would be. So, if that's I don't know if that's, I don't really feel good about it either way. So, but I do think that the other components of this site are exciting, the proposed project. Does this go on to council or is this our change? It does go to council. Okay, I don't have any other questions.
Hunter?
Just wanted a clarification on process again. You mentioned that when a demolition permit is applied for and a building is historic, the Historic Commission staff has the opportunity to, or is required to, sign off on that demolition?
Close. If a structure is register eligible, and I want to make sure I'm saying this the right way, this is out of Metro Code 16.28.190, which has to do with the issuance of demo permits. If a structure is eligible for listing on the National Register, or otherwise meets the criteria under the state law, which is under Title VII, under the Tennessee Code annotated having to do with historic structures, as determined by a Historic Zoning Commission, but is not included in an overlay district, which obviously this is not. Codes Administration won't issue a demolition permit for the structure until the Executive Director of the Historical Commission approves the demolition permit. So Historic does get a bite at the apple with regard to the demolition permit itself, if in fact this is a National Register eligible structure. And again, that's under the Metro Code, not just under state law. And then the Executive Director has a finite period of time to take action on it one way or the other. I think it's actually 90 days after the permit application is received, unless there's a longer period agreed upon by the applicant and the Executive Director, which is rarely the case in my very limited experience with that. This is a relatively new section of law, but it is one that's in there for good reason and gives Historic an opportunity to review the demolition application.
And you mentioned before that, of course, a rezoning of the property doesn't change doesn't change that process, and certainly doesn't change the status of this structure with respect to its eligibility to the register or anything else.
And you stated that correctly. Whether there is an SP mixed use put in place, whether the MUIA were to stay in place, whether this was changed to something almost entirely different, there would still be the availability for an application of a demolition permit or review by the historic staff, namely the Executive Director. The zoning change doesn't really change any of that in terms of the process that's put before the property owner or the developer in this case.
Walter?
I think he's answered my question.
Okay. We need a motion. Well, they're trying to decide how to make a motion. Could you show us exactly where the house is in relationship, maybe the lobby or the restaurant or the pool, or where it sits on this property? Covers quite a bit of the area.
Yeah, this is the historic structure that's on the center lot. So if you were looking back at the site plan, it'd be on this middle lot here.
Probably right about the hotel. I just wonder if there's any possibility of the developer maybe leaving the front of the building and take, the back half off, but the facade would be incorporated maybe into the hotel, or even if it was built around it, and when you go in, that's part of the hotel lobby where you register or something. It's just wonder if there's any possibility, because you see the intensity of the people that are here in opposition only because of the building, that it's one of the few that's left. And as a builder myself, I understand that if I owned the property, I could go over and tear it down. I'd make application and probably tear it down. So that's not really the issue, but the issue is there a way of preserving a portion of it, either from the street or within the building, and that building then is maybe a focal point that people say, hey, when you're in Nashville, go look at this hotel. It's got a building within a building, and it's the lobby or it's the bar or something that it could be left. And I don't know with the underground, if you're putting underground parking in there and that's part of it, then it's probably not feasible. But or is it feasible to remove that building and put it in another location? Yeah, come to the microphone. Yes, sir.
I didn't want to get up without being asked. There will be underground parking. I believe it's 2 levels below ground. So obviously
you're going to dig a big hole in the house.
There'll be a 25-foot deep hole there to take this parking, and of course that relieves pressure on going up with more parking otherwise. So there's some practical reasons why the entire house or even a significant part of the house could not survive this or any similar scale of demolition.
Let me interrupt you. I understand the underground parking, it wouldn't survive. The Hermitage Hotel, when anybody comes into town that hasn't been to Hermitage Hotel, take them down there and show them the lobby, show them the men's restroom. I mean, it's a famous place to be.
I take people there frequently.
And that could be a focal point here if the building, and I don't know structure-wise, and you probably can't answer that tonight, but the building looks like it's been added on to the back, but the front of it, maybe, is there any way of securing that and moving it?
There may be ways.
I know it could be expensive, but.
Well, there may be ways to utilize significant parts of the facade, and that's what everybody remembers because it's a very pretty facade. When you get back into the building, it's been changed. The fabric has been changed significantly. It's been an office, a growing office for 50 years or more now. I think Mr. Tibbs, is he still here, said that an architecture firm, I believe it was his architecture firm, renovated it first in the 1950s. So that's approximately 60 years ago. A lot of it has changed. The fabric is different than it was. But there may be ways to incorporate some of the architectural elements in the interior. And I'm just going to have to look back at the developers and see if that's feasible. I'm a lawyer. I'm not an architect. I'm not an engineer. I don't know. And they're shaking their heads saying...
If you would come to the microphone, because I think it's an important issue that may or may not get approval unless there's some codicil in there that a portion of the building or some part of it would be incorporated into the building.
My name is Nixon Jefferson. I'm director of the multifamily division for Regent Partners, the proposed developer with this site in conjunction with St. Clair Holdings. We certainly, and I'm a preservationist at heart myself and serve on various boards in Atlanta, toward preservation and the Southern Society for Historic Preservation. So we certainly will work with the Historic Commission. We would like to offer this and work with anyone if they'd like to relocate the house in its entirety. We'll do everything possible. If not, we certainly are compassionate to that, and we'll work within the process to conform and see if we can make an accommodation on any front.
Okay.
At this point, we've not explored that. This is a very recent objection we were made aware of in the past week.
And I think you can appreciate the intensity of what the commissioners and gentleman sitting over here, Hunter, is on the Historic Commission as a representative from this board, and he's very adamant, about his intensity, and a lot of people that were here that have seen that area, and I've grown up here for all of my life in Nashville. And a good example was a church there on 7th and Broad. When they tore that building down, they kept the steeple there. And you've got a modern building next to it, but you've got that steeple, which is one of the focal points of when you do photography here it's unique. So if there's any way, you probably can't build around it, but if there's any way of moving that building, putting it off the side and bringing it back in and building around it, I think you'd be doing
certainly explore every opportunity.
Great service to the city, and I think it would be a focal point over a period of time that people came in, they'd want to come to that hotel just to see that. So might keep that in mind. At this time, I'm going to ask for a motion, and
I think I'd like to make a motion.
Let me say this: when you make a motion, I'd like for the commission to consider approve the staff recommendations, but put in there that some effort be put into preserving that building in some fashion.
Well, let me ask you this. What I was considering, and you can answer this, all of you, if you think it's a good idea or not, I was considering maybe making a motion to defer it so that, this isn't really our, what did you say, our purview. If there is community frustration and the Historic Commission does have to weigh in, can we vote after? Can we have them go out and work out something if they move the building to a different site, whatever they might work out, and then come back to us? Do we have to make a motion? Do we have to make a decision tonight?
I'm going to let Rick answer that.
I don't think you have to make a decision tonight at all. But I think it might be more appropriate. This is just a suggestion, that you condition this approval. It requires a final site plan after it's done, and that site plan, theoretically, I'll just state that you could have as a condition, and again, this would have to be adopted by council, but it would be a condition that says that no demolition or site development take place until a final site plan is approved, and ask them as part of that final site plan to come back with a researched, intelligent way, whether they could incorporate the house or not incorporate the house, and whether they could incorporate the alley or not incorporate the alley. It wouldn't commit them to having to do that, but it would require them to come back to the commission and as part of the final site plan review.
And part of that review be through negotiation through the historic.
Well, that'd be part of it, right? Yeah.
Just to clarify, the alley issue was, I think it's a one-way alley, and if they had widened part of the alley, I think that might have become an issue with Public Works. So I think that was part of the reason why they weren't accessing the alley, because today it's a one-way alley, and only widening a portion of it could have become an issue.
It had been discussed. Yes. That helps. Thanks. No, that's okay. That's helpful to learn. That's a difference.
If you'd like to speak, I will recognize you if you've got a quick comment.
Yes, I just want to remind the commission that this is not a demolition hearing or a site plan hearing. It's a zoning hearing.
But you're asking for zoning change, and this commission has the right to make decisions on zoning. It's not always based on black on white. Sometimes it's based on emotions.
I understand that, but we're getting perilously close to exceeding the power of the Planning Commission. Conditions are one thing. Conditions of dealing with, which another part of the code deals with, is another. And I know it's close ground here, but we're here for the zoning. Site plan comes later, and the developer has committed to look at all alternatives. If there's we're very worried about what might show up in the conditions coming from the floor today. Now, yes, we want a motion,
This commission has the power to defer indefinitely, so.
It does. We understand.
Well, in particular, the commission under an SP has the right to require architectural drawings as well. So, I mean, that could be that's a normal part of the SP process that is written into the enabling legislation. So, you know, the commission could defer action until you have a set of architectural drawings and you'd understand what the impact is. I was just suggesting that that could be part of the moving forward with that. An SP provides the commission with the authority to have additional information over and above the current zoning, and Mr. Papel knows that.
Okay.
Yeah, can I have a moment to confer?
We're finished with you. Hunter, I'm going to ask you to make the motion.
You're going to make a motion.
Well, I was considering a deferral so that something could be worked out about some of the topics that we don't really control directly. I mean, I think if there's an option on a property that is contingent on zoning, in a way we have an effect, but I don't know the circumstance. I'm more interested in seeing if the portion of the house that's historic that could be protected and maybe relocated than just brought into the building, because it might not jive at all aesthetically, and then just feel like a token gesture to something we tore down, which I'm not sure would feel so great. I don't know which way it should go is my point on that. So that's why I was thinking more of a deferral and then have it come back to us with, but if we're approving an SP, I guess that's not really the point. We're talking about whether we want to have a project on this location that does what we're asking for in general, and maybe a caveat to our approval, I think, might be better than a deferral. So I think I'd tend more towards that, following that discussion.
Are you deferring to Hunter?
I'm looking for,
Don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think that you're probably in a better position to make that. And if you want to defer, then that's fine too.
No, that's fine.
Well, you're also an architect. I mean, what's the reality of some of this, of bringing?
Well, I didn't mean to pick on anyone from out of town earlier. But I think you hear what's really important to this community. And I think there are ways that, as an architect, I know could easily incorporate, pay tribute to, salvage, utilize on interiors, utilize in special ways that would make your project unique. Probably both exterior and interior elements of the building. And so I will attempt a condition that would urge the developer to do that. And also, I guess, just a reminder, our recommendation here is just a recommendation to council. I know it could impact the number of, if the condition changed or something, it could potentially impact the number of council members that would have to vote for this, but it is just a recommendation, along with the conditions. So I'll make, before I make the motion, one last question. So the alley has, it's one way going, remind me, it's going west, is that correct?
Yes. Okay. Yes, correct.
And and that was, it's unusual to have one-way alleys. Maybe that was put in place with the Palmer Plaza project, I don't know, the way but their garage has access from the alley. So I don't know if there's...
Yeah, but it comes in off of whatever that would be, 17th. I mean, the building's at the corner, so you'd come in.
So you're coming in, here you'd be coming in
all the way,
a half block away from the project to enter. Okay. I'll make the motion that we approve staff recommendation with the added condition of the developer working with the executive director of the Historic Commission if demolition is approved to salvage elements of both the interior and exterior that are deemed salvageable and worthy of preserving to be incorporated in the project.
Do we need to
Is
be
that-
that specific, or can it say something about the relocation of the entire structure?
Yeah.
Well, I said if demolition is approved. So yeah, I don't know.
If demolition
Not
is approved,
perfect.
relocating or salvaging something.
Yeah, instead of demolishing.
Sure, I'll amend
Let's
it.
be specific on our wording, so.
Yeah, I'll amend or change my condition to include the possibility of relocating the structure. Is the intent of that condition clear enough to?
The historic valuable portion of the structure, whatever. Okay, I'll
Sure.
second that.
Okay, we got a motion.
Whatever you said.
We have a motion, second. All in favor? Raise your hand. Okay, unanimous, so it passes. Okay, Walter, anything from the courthouse that we need to know?
Well, we did pass the Old Man Gulch Bridge, pedestrian bridge.
All right.
On second reading.
On second reading, of course. Well, you know, after looking at it, we found out it was addressing some of the same topics that we were talking about tonight in terms of it accomplishes some of the congestion, walkability, as well as the connectivity. I mean, because you got so many ways in and out of that, that's another way of getting in and out. And you may go all the way over there to Appalachia. So I think it's good. I think it's kind of good. And then we figured out that it's going to be paid for a lot with the CIBD funds that's already in the Gulch, which means that it should pay for itself in about 7 years. That's what Rich Reeland said, based on Rich Reeland calculations.
Thank you. Hunter, anything you want to add from historic?
Sure. Well, you know, I've been on the Historic Commission for a couple of years now, I guess, and it's just recently gotten, you know, very interesting to sit on both of these commissions because of a lot of the proposals that are coming in the historic districts, the SPs, and so on. And so, again, I mentioned this last time, but the staff is working with Historic Commission staff on a number of issues, are working closely on SPs that are within historic zoning district. They're looking potentially at some procedural changes on, as I understand it, potentially where the Historic Commission might actually review and approve either concurrently or, you know, early on massing, the basic massing around an SP and the zoning ordinance, which I think is good because right now there's an expectation once you get your council approved zoning that you can build as much as your entitlement, you know, as much as your zoning says, but that's not really the case, and the Historic Commission does have the ability to reduce the scale and the height and the mass, which could affect your entitlement. So I appreciate the staff working on all that. Likewise, the Historic Commission had a workshop recently about a lot of the recent legislation on DADUs and outbuildings and detached duplexes and all of those things. And I appreciate the planning staff working with them. And I think we're getting closer to kind of aligning definitions and, you know, goals and things like that as far as all those things go.
I have a question just to help us understand the way the Historic Commission works. If there is something that's eligible, it takes the property, the Historic Commission can deem it eligible with the federal rules and everything, but it takes the property owner to say they want to move it to be on the register?
My understanding is that the National Register is a property owner initiated. The
so only
local
a property owner can initiate
National Register.
National
But
Register.
isn't that the one that protects it from demolition completely?
No. The historic overlays and the landmarks can be initiated by the commission or either the Planning Commission or the Historic Commission. That's a zoning action, and so it would follow the zoning action. Historic, typically, or in the past, those have all been initiated by the Historic Commission. And so, but that doesn't mean, I don't believe there's anything in the code that precludes the Planning Commission or council from initiating it, I don't think.
Well,
it has to go through that review process, but...
I guess my point was, if there are a number of places in the top 9 or the things that around the city that are historically eligible, what's preventing anybody from moving them to the register that would further protect them? I mean, is it the actual property owner has to agree with that and initiate it?
I think they would have to move them to an overlay zoning district to put a historic conservation or historic district or a historic landmark overlay on those. That's the real way to get the preservation of those. Just having the National Register designation doesn't provide any real protection.
Unless the federal government's doing something.
The way Tim described it to me is and it's probably more complicated than this, but in simple terms, being on the register gives you certain potential incentives, I guess federal incentives. Being National Register eligible gives federal, state, and local authorities certain regulatory opportunities that are the same as if you're on the register. So they're equally as protective, in terms of what we can do locally, I think. And that's where perhaps this demolition permit, if you're eligible or on the register, the executive director has to sign off on it. I think, the landmark tool perhaps is the best tool that we have right now. And I don't think we have gotten aggressive in terms of trying to put landmark zoning on anyone's property that doesn't want it. But if this community is serious about protecting certain, resources, then that might be a direction to go, or at least begin working with those property owners.
Okay. Rick, you got to make a report?
Yeah, very quickly.
Yeah.
The next meeting is going to be held at the school board. They're doing election training here. And so the meeting for October 23rd will be held at the school board. We will precede that at 2 o'clock with a workshop at the school board. And that workshop will be the opportunity to go through the preferred future, the major initiation of the community unveiling of the preferred future will take place on October 30th. And we'll be briefing the commission in the workshop before that meeting. And we'll also, I guess, talk about some of the beginning implementation options on housing and stuff like that. So it's a really important one to make sure that the commission's fully briefed before we start that heavy process of community engagements, which will include the initial countywide meeting on the 30th, and then we'll follow that up with 4 meetings in different parts of the county in November, as well as doing a series of book of planner sessions for individual neighborhoods. But that will include as well, the preferred future and the community plan updates.
You'll send us a map and where to park and which door to go in. Any comments? Go home.
My mother's really